What happens when tens of thousands are forced to leave overnight, and two nations' destinies are rewritten? Across Russia, mass deportations of Uzbek migrants have sparked a humanitarian disaster and chaos at the borders. For families who once built their lives in Russian cities, everything is upended in a matter of days. Jobs lost, homes abandoned, and futures thrown into doubt. Long lines of buses, trucks, and cars snake for miles at the border, with people waiting days just to cross. Children shiver by roadside fires, while mothers weep over the uncertainty ahead. Makeshift camps fill with those who have nowhere else to go. The crisis is not just logistical, it's personal, with hope slipping away one deportation at a time. While outrage and fear echo through Tashkent, Moscow remains diplomatically silent. Instead of offering explanations, Russian officials double down, insisting this is simply about restoring order. But the silence from the Kremlin only fuels anger and suspicion. On Uzbek streets, protests erupt, demanding answers and action to protect their citizens. Is this the moment when a historic alliance begins to unravel? Could the forced return of so many trigger a new chapter, where Uzbekistan asserts its sovereignty and Russia's grip on Central Asia weakens? The stakes are enormous, not just lost income for families, but national reputations on the line, and perhaps the dawn of a new, unpredictable era for both nations. Let's rewind and understand how a simmering tension erupted into open crisis. To understand how this relationship reached its breaking point, we need to look at the chain of events and simmering tensions that led to this explosive moment. For years, millions depended on a silent agreement, until, overnight, the rules were torn apart. In Russia, Uzbek migrants have long formed the backbone of critical industries, building the roads, harvesting the crops, and keeping entire cities running. Their hard work sent billions of rubles home each year, supporting thousands of families in Uzbekistan and lifting communities out of poverty. But as frustration and uncertainty surged inside Russia, the government turned its attention to migrants. Suddenly, new crackdowns swept across Russian cities. Document checks became relentless. Entire neighborhoods faced raids. Thousands of Uzbeks, some who had lived and worked in Russia for decades, were pulled from their jobs, homes, and lives, forced to pack up and leave in a matter of days. Official statements claimed these drastic measures were just about enforcing migration laws and keeping the country safe. Yet beneath the surface, something deeper was at play. Political motives, not just legal concerns, were shaping the new reality. The authorities framed this as cleaning up the labor market. But to the families left stranded and businesses desperate for workers, the story felt very different. If the fragile ties holding these two countries together unravel, the risks are immense. Economies could falter. Ordinary people, on both sides of the border, face losing not just income, but hope, stability, and their sense of belonging. But the official story quickly broke down when confronted with the harsh, chaotic scenes unfolding at the borders. On the ground, desperation grows. Let's take you to the border, where families and futures hang in the balance. On the ground, the story isn't about policy, it's about survival. Picture border crossings choked with endless lines of buses, trucks, and weary families. Thousands sleep outdoors in bitter cold, huddled around makeshift fires, clutching what little they have left. The sense of order has collapsed into chaos, as overwhelmed border guards struggle to process the human tide. Social media floods with haunting images and desperate pleas. Videos show parents cradling hungry children, elderly people shivering on frozen earth, and impromptu protests breaking out at border checkpoints. The hashtags calling for justice trend across Uzbek networks. Every new clip intensifies public outrage and exposes the raw human toll. Meanwhile, Russian state media insists everything is under control, that only illegal migrants are being sent home, and the deportations are strictly by the book. But the reality on the ground screams otherwise. Footage from the border contradicts the official narrative, showing confusion, suffering, and, increasingly, despair. The contrast between polished news reports and viral videos is impossible to ignore. Tashkent's response is swift and sharp. Uzbek diplomats demand explanations and immediate action, but Moscow offers only bureaucratic reassurances. At home, anger explodes. Crowds gather in Tashkent and other cities, demanding government intervention and respect for their citizens. The crisis becomes a matter of national dignity, not just human rights. The situation grows dire as the first clashes erupt at border posts. Tempers flare, and in the turmoil, people are injured. One loses their life. The tragedy marks a turning point. What began as a bureaucratic measure now threatens lives, family bonds, and the very fabric of regional stability. Both governments face mounting pressure from their people, and the world is watching closely. Lives hang in the balance, and with each passing day, the stakes rise. National pride, family security, and the fragile peace of Central Asia are now at risk. With the crisis escalating and the world taking notice, Uzbekistan's next moves will decide if the confrontation turns into open rupture, or if there's still a way back from the brink. With every confrontation, the region's balance of power shifts, and the shockwaves are felt far beyond the border. In the capital of Uzbekistan, outrage boils over. The government issues its harshest ultimatum yet to Moscow. Stop the deportations, open the borders for urgent humanitarian aid, and publicly apologize for the treatment of Uzbek citizens. For the first time in decades, Tashkent is not just demanding answers, it is drawing a red line. Inside Russia, panic spreads among business owners and regional leaders. Industries from construction to agriculture grind to a halt, as labor shortages worsen by the day. Governors plead for a pause in deportations, but the policy continues, threatening to trigger an economic downturn that could reverberate nationwide. Russian companies, once reliant on steady streams of migrant labor, now face abandoned work sites and mounting financial losses. Outside observers watch as international actors seize the moment. China and Turkey, sensing opportunity, step in with offers of financial support, trade, and strategic partnership to Uzbekistan. Messages from Beijing and Ankara signal not just empathy, but a willingness to reshape the regional order. As old alliances crack, new corridors of influence begin to form. Emboldened by massive public support at home, the Uzbek government takes unprecedented steps. Tashkent recalls its ambassador from Moscow, freezes bilateral programs, and signals the desire for a new, more independent course. On the streets, citizens rally behind the government, demanding dignity for their families and a future that is no longer tied to Russian whims. The display of unity stuns both allies and rivals. Meanwhile, Russia's reputation as the Central Asian heavyweight suffers a severe blow. Long considered the regional leader, Moscow now finds its credibility eroded, not only in Uzbekistan, but across neighboring states who watch with alarm. The message is clear. The era of unquestioned Russian dominance is over, and the cost of miscalculation is rising for all. As the old order unravels, the risks are immense. Economic catastrophe looms, with lost remittances and disrupted trade hurting millions of families. Political missteps could fracture societies already under strain, and any further escalation threatens to plunge the region into lasting instability. Yet even as the dust settles, a deeper question remains. Can trust ever be rebuilt, or has the rift become too wide for reconciliation? Out of crisis comes opportunity, but also a difficult reckoning. Faced with the sudden return of hundreds of thousands of its citizens, Uzbekistan moves fast. The government launches sweeping integration and employment programs, channeling resources into skills training, new factories, and construction projects. For many returnees, the transition is steep, but for the first time, they feel seen and valued at home. Uzbekistan seizes the moment to look beyond Russia. With remittances drying up, Tashkent pivots to new partners, including China and Turkey, and ramps up investment in its own workforce and critical infrastructure. The country's leaders call on citizens to build a self-reliant future, turning adversity into a mission for national renewal. A powerful wave of unity sweeps across Uzbekistan. People who once saw themselves as economic exiles now find purpose in rebuilding their communities. Flags are raised, slogans chanted, and a new sense of pride emerges, one rooted in resilience and hope rather than nostalgia or dependency. Meanwhile, Russia faces a growing backlash. Labor shortages hit hard in sectors like construction and agriculture, driving up costs and stalling projects. International criticism mounts, with human rights groups condemning the deportations and former partners questioning Moscow's reliability. The Kremlin's grip on Central Asia begins to slip, as countries like Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan watch closely and weigh their own options. The region slowly transforms. Instead of a Russian-dominated sphere, Central Asia starts to look more multipolar, open to new alliances and ideas, less willing to take orders from Moscow. It is a moment of reckoning, but also of real possibility. Yet huge risks remain. Will this newfound resilience endure, or could old habits and dependencies creep back in, trapping a new generation in the same cycles? The choices made now will shape the region's future for decades. But what does this rupture truly mean for ordinary people, and how might it reshape the very fabric of daily life across Uzbekistan and beyond? When old alliances collapse, who gets to write the new story? The mass expulsion of Uzbek migrants from Russia is more than a humanitarian tragedy. It is a seismic shift in the balance of power across Central Asia. Suddenly, decades of mutual dependency and silent agreements have unraveled, leaving thousands stranded at borders and millions questioning what comes next. For years, Russia was the center of gravity in the region. But with every busload sent back, that dominance fades. Uzbekistan, propelled by crisis and popular outrage, is seizing this moment to assert its sovereignty, demanding respect for its citizens, and threatening to break old patterns of obedience. This crisis exposes how migration policies are not just bureaucratic decisions, but powerful levers that can destabilize entire empires. In a matter of weeks, labor markets have been thrown into chaos, families cut off from their livelihoods, and long-standing economic ties reduced to uncertainty. Russian employers scramble to fill the gaps, while Uzbek communities struggle to survive without remittances. But beyond numbers and headlines, the stakes are deeply personal. For each migrant, it is the risk of losing a future built through years of sacrifice. For both nations, it is the test of dignity and identity, whether to accept humiliation or to chart a new course. And for the region, it is the question of who will shape Central Asia's next chapter. Will it remain under Moscow's shadow or find new partners and new purpose? As the old order fractures, the world is watching. The choices made now, by governments and by people, will echo for generations. In this moment of irreversible change, we are witnessing not just a humanitarian disaster, but the end of an era and the uncertain birth of something new.